We're going deep today on introversion
Uh-huh.
with Susan Cain's The Power of Quiet.
Okay.
We're going to cover some cool science, I think, about introverts and
Yeah.
extroverts,
Yeah.
and maybe bust some myths along the way.
Right.
I think you're going to find some surprising stuff in here, no matter what your personality
Oh,
is.
absolutely.
So let's just start at the beginning.
Okay.
How do we even become introverted or extroverted in the first place?
Well, it's not just about whether you like parties or prefer quiet nights. There's actually a biological basis for these tendencies.
Oh, wow.
King dives into Dr. Jerome Kagan's research with infants, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I remember reading about this.
Yeah.
He exposed babies to all sorts of new things like pop balloons
Uh-huh.
and even Q-tips.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was looking at how strongly babies reacted to these new experiences.
Right.
Some babies, the ones he called high reactive, just went into overdrive. Like their heart rate spiked, pupils dilated, you name it.
So it's like they were super sensitive to everything new?
Exactly. Kagan theorized that it had to do with the amygdala,
Right.
the part of the brain that handles emotions like fear and stress. The high reactive infants seem to have more sensitive amygdalas picking up on those new stimuli much more intensely.
Okay. So, but here's the really crazy part.
Yeah.
Kagan didn't stop there. He actually followed those kids as they grew up.
Right, and even as adults, when shown unfamiliar faces, those who had been high reactive infants still showed a stronger response in their amygdalas. It was like their early temperament left a lasting imprint on their brains.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Like, think about those early tendencies sticking with you for decades.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, does that mean we're kind of stuck with the temperament we're born with?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another fascinating area of research.
Yeah.
It's not just about our biology, it's also about how that biology interacts with our environment.
Right, nature and nurture.
Yeah.
That's where the orchid hypothesis comes in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like this: dandelion children are pretty resilient. They can thrive in any environment.
Okay.
Orchid children, on the other hand, are more sensitive.
Oh,
They need specific conditions to truly flourish.
I love that analogy. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
You know, this actually reminds me of my own childhood.
Uh-huh.
I definitely felt like I wilted in certain environments, but really thrived in others.
Yeah.
What about you? Can you relate to that?
Oh, absolutely. I think we all can relate to that idea to some extent.
Yeah.
The key takeaway is that high reactive kids, those orchids, are like sponges. They absorb more from their surroundings, both the good and the bad.
So it's like having a superpower, but also a vulnerability.
Exactly.
Okay.
They may be more vulnerable to negative experiences, but they also have the potential to blossom in extraordinary ways under the right conditions.
Right.
Things like good parenting, supportive teachers, a stable environment can make all the difference.
So we have this biological predisposition.
Yeah.
But our environment plays a huge role in shaping who we become. It's not a deterministic thing. There's still room for growth and change.
Absolutely. And Cain doesn't stop there.
Okay.
She introduces Dr. Carl Schwartz's research, which takes Kagan's work a step further and provides some really encouraging insights.
This is where it gets even more interesting.
Yeah.
What did Dr. Schwartz find?
Well, he studied the adult brains of those same high reactive individuals that Kagan had followed.
So decades later, those initial temperament patterns were still there.
Yes, but here's the twist.
Okay.
Some of those high reactive adults had developed coping mechanisms. Even though their amygdalas were still sensitive, they had learned to manage those strong reactions.
So it's like our brains can adapt. We can learn to navigate those situations that might initially feel overwhelming.
Right.
That's incredibly hopeful.
It is, and Cain uses this great analogy of a rubber band.
Oh, I remember this, the rubber band theory.
Exactly. We can stretch our personalities, but only within certain limits set by our biology.
So like, I might never be a party animal, but I can learn to be comfortable at social gatherings without feeling completely drained.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot, the optimal level of stimulation for our individual temperament.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're not just destined to be a certain way based on our biology or even our early experiences.
Yeah.
We have a certain amount of free will to shape our personalities.
Absolutely. But that doesn't mean we can completely transform ourselves.
Right.
You can't become someone we're not.
Yeah.
It's more about understanding and accepting our natural tendencies and then finding ways to work with them.
And that's where Cain's work really starts to challenge the traditional view of introversion, right?
Absolutely. She starts to reframe sensitivity not as a weakness, but as a valuable strength.
Okay.
This actually builds on the work of Dr. Elaine Aron.
Who has done fascinating research on highly sensitive people. let's talk about that. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. Welcome back. Before the break, we were starting to get into Dr. Elaine Aron's work on highly sensitive people,
Yeah.
or HSPs as she calls them.
Right.
I think this part is going to really resonate with you.
It's powerful stuff. Aaron argues that these highly sensitive folks process information and experiences more deeply than others.
So they're not just overreacting, they're actually experiencing things on a different level.
Exactly. And this can manifest in so many different ways, from vivid dreams to a strong dislike of small talk, even sensitivity to art and nature.
I've definitely noticed that about myself.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to nature. I feel so much more alive and present when I'm surrounded by trees and fresh air. It's like my senses are heightened.
That's a great example, and Cain connects this back to Kagan's work, emphasizing that high sensitivity is often rooted in that same biological predisposition to be more aware and reactive to stimuli.
It's like having a more finely tuned antenna, picking up on subtle signals that others might miss entirely.
Exactly. But for a long time, this sensitivity was seen as a weakness, something to be overcome.
Right.
Aaron flips that idea on its head and argues that it's actually a superpower.
It makes you wonder how many amazing contributions we've missed out on because sensitive individuals were told to toughen up or suppress their true nature.
Right. Think about Eleanor Roosevelt. Cain uses her story to illustrate how sensitivity can be a driving force for positive change.
Yeah, here's this shy, awkward young woman who transforms into a powerful advocate for human rights, all because she could connect so deeply with the suffering of others.
Exactly. Her sensitivity became her strength. And this brings us to a really thought-provoking question.
Okay.
If sensitivity has all these advantages, why hasn't it been weeded out by evolution? After all, in a world that often rewards boldness and aggression, shouldn't those quieter voices have been silenced?
It's a great question. It makes you wonder if maybe there's a deeper evolutionary reason why sensitivity persists.
Cain certainly thinks so. She introduces the trade-off theory,
Oh, okay.
which suggests that every personality trait comes with both pros and cons. Their value depends entirely on the situation.
So what might be advantageous in one environment could be a disadvantage in another.
Exactly. Think about those shy pumpkin seed fish we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
They thrive because their caution helps them avoid those metal traps, but put them in a predator-free environment, and they might struggle to compete with their bolder counterparts.
It's all about context. What works for you in one situation might not work in another. And maybe that's why we see this diversity of temperaments in the first place.
Exactly. It's like nature is hedging its bets, having a mix of introverts and extroverts. Sensitive and bold individuals ensures the survival of the species as a whole.
So we need those risk takers to push boundaries and those careful observers to keep us grounded. It's all about balance.
And that balance even plays out within ourselves. Remember that rubber band theory we talked about? It applies here too. We might naturally lean towards introversion or extroversion, but we can stretch ourselves, even venture outside our comfort zones when needed.
But wouldn't that be exhausting? I mean, if I'm naturally introverted, wouldn't it take a lot of energy to act like an extrovert all the time?
Absolutely. And that's where the concept of sweet spots comes into play. It's about finding those environments and activities that energize us, that feel aligned with our natural temperament.
So it's not about forcing ourselves to be someone we're not, but rather creating a life that allows us to be our best self.
Exactly. Maybe it's about finding a career that values our strengths, designing a home that feels like a sanctuary, or even just being mindful about how we spend our free time.
I think a lot of people feel pressure to conform to this extroverted ideal, especially in today's world where it seems like everyone's constantly on and connected. But what Cain is saying is it's okay to be different, to embrace your own unique rhythms and needs.
Absolutely. And this actually brings us to another fascinating challenge that Cain throws down. She questions our obsession with coolness and explores the surprising benefits of something that most of us try to avoid: blushing.
Wait, blushing. But isn't that like the ultimate sign of awkwardness and insecurity?
You would think so, right? But Cain presents some pretty compelling evidence to the contrary.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, she starts by exploring how our perception of coolness might actually be linked to low reactivity. You know, those people who seem effortlessly calm and collected in any situation?
Yeah, like they have this unflappable chill factor.
Exactly. And Cain suggests that this ability to stay cool under pressure might be rooted in their biology.
Okay.
Their bodies simply don't react as intensely to stimuli, They don't sweat the small stuff, literally.
So they're not just putting on a brave face, their physiology is actually different.
Right. She even talks about how a low resting heart rate was seen as a desirable trait among early astronauts.
I guess it makes sense if you're about to be strapped to a rocket and launched into space.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want someone who panics easily at the helm.
Exactly. But Cain also raises a really interesting question. Is this lack of reactivity always a good thing?
Yeah.
Are we missing out on something by striving for this constant state of coolness?
I never thought about it that way. It's like maybe there's something to be said for feeling things deeply, even if it means we get flustered or embarrassed sometimes.
And that brings us back to blushing. Cain argues that it's not a sign of weakness, but rather a powerful social signal.
Okay, I'm really curious to hear how she backs that up. This is totally blowing my mind.
Well, she cites research showing that people who blush are actually perceived as more trustworthy and likable. It's like this involuntary display of humility and a desire to make amends.
Because it shows you care what others think.
Exactly. It signals that you're aware of social norms and that you're concerned about how your actions affect others.
So it's actually a strength, not a weakness? It's like a social cue that says, hey, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, but I'm willing to own up to them.
Precisely. And in a world where we're often bombarded with perfectly curated images and personalities, that kind of authenticity can be incredibly refreshing.
I never thought I'd say this, but I'm starting to see blushing in a whole new light.
It's all about reframing our perspective, challenging those assumptions we've always taken for granted. And Cain does a brilliant job of that throughout her book.
This has been so insightful. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the biological roots of introversion, the importance of environment, the evolutionary trade-offs of sensitivity, and even the surprising power of blushing. But the big question is, how do we apply all this to our own lives? How do we find those sweet spots that allow us to truly thrive?
Those are great questions. And luckily for us, Cain offers some really practical advice on how to navigate a world that's often designed for extroverts.
Well, let's dive into that after.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear what she has to say.
Yeah.
All right, we're back and ready to unpack Cain's practical tips for thriving as an introvert.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what kind of advice does she offer?
Well, she starts by emphasizing the importance of honoring our natural energy cycles.
Okay.
You know, recognizing when we need to recharge, when we need solitude versus social interaction. Introverts often need more downtime to process experiences and gather their energy.
That makes so much sense. It's like knowing your own personal battery life and making sure you don't run yourself completely dry. Have you found that to be true in your own life?
Oh, absolutely. I used to feel guilty about needing so much time alone.
Yeah.
But now I see it as essential for my well-being. It's not selfish, it's self-care.
I think a lot of people struggle with that, especially in a culture that values busyness and productivity above all else. But Cain is saying it's okay to prioritize your own needs, to carve out space for those restorative activities that replenish your energy.
Right.
What are some of your favorite ways to recharge?
Well, I love going for long walks in nature. It really helps me clear my head and feel more grounded. And reading, of course. Getting lost in a good book is pure bliss for me.
I can definitely relate to that. And Cain also talks about the importance of finding work that aligns with your strengths.
Yeah.
You know, not every introvert is going to thrive in a high-energy, sales-driven environment.
Right.
Some of us are better suited to roles that require deep focus, careful analysis, and creative problem solving.
Exactly. And it's not just about the type of work, it's also about the environment.
So like creating a workspace that minimizes distractions, allows for periods of solitude, and fosters a sense of calm. I could see how that would make a huge difference.
It's about setting yourself up for success by matching your surroundings to your temperament.
This is making me think about my own work setup. Maybe I need to rethink that open plan office situation.
Yeah, it's definitely worth considering. And Cain also stresses the importance of choosing your social circles wisely. You know, introverts often thrive in smaller, more intimate gatherings.
Quality over quantity. I've definitely found that to be true. I'd rather have a few close friends that I can really connect with than a huge network of acquaintances.
Exactly. It's about cultivating those deep, meaningful connections that truly nourish you, rather than feeling obligated to attend every social event on the calendar.
Right, and sometimes it's about giving ourselves permission to say no, which can be incredibly difficult in a culture that often equates busyness with importance.
You're right, that can be a real challenge. But as we've been discussing, introversion isn't about being antisocial. It's about being selective about how you expend your social energy.
And when you do choose to engage socially, Cain encourages introverts to lean into their strengths.
Absolutely. Like, The ability to listen deeply, ask thoughtful questions, and offer insightful observations.
Those qualities can make introverts incredible conversationalists and valued members of any team.
It's about recognizing that introversion isn't a liability, it's an asset.
So what does this all mean for our listeners? What's the takeaway message here?
Well, I think Cain's work offers a message of hope and empowerment. It's about understanding yourself, accepting yourself, and creating a life that truly honors who you are.
It's about recognizing that introversion isn't a weakness to be overcome, but a valuable and essential part of the human tapestry.
Yeah, it's about appreciating the quiet power that resides within each of us.
So as you move forward from this deep dive, think about how you can apply these insights to your own life. How can you create a life that feels more authentic, more fulfilling, more aligned with your true self?
Yeah, the answers lie within you. It's time to embrace your quiet strengths and step boldly into the world knowing that your unique perspective has something valuable to offer.
What a fantastic way to wrap things up. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling inspired and ready to embrace my inner introvert. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.